Everyone gets to a point in whatever MMO they're playing, Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, Lost Ark, Guild Wars 2, where they've done everything, or at the very least where they've done everything that they want to do. And at that moment they go ahead, they boot up their web browser, typically Google Chrome, they make their way over to YouTube, and they begin looking for a new MMO to play. Hey, my name is Stix, and if you made it here, then you are looking for something to replace whatever MMO you have been grinding recently, however temporary. This video is not an all-inclusive best MMOs list, as several of the best MMOs available are premium titles. Rather, this is a list of the best, easily accessible free titles that anyone and everyone are capable of playing without restriction. These games are a collection of different genres with different combat styles, different graphical styles, and general focuses. Quick shout out to our patrons over on Patreon. This allows you to directly support us if you're interested. Every patron will have their name appear at the beginning of every single YouTube video, and you'll be immortalized in the MMO genre forever. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. AION is a Korean MMO developed and published by NCSoft. It released in North America back in 2009. Even despite being roughly 15 years old, AION continues to be one of the better looking MMOs available on the market graphically, and by far one of the best looking free titles. AION utilizes a tap target combat system with a focus on chaining abilities together in succession. It features a large world, albeit with segregated zones. There is a strong focus on faction-based PvP both in the open world and in instance PvP arenas. Blade & Soul is a Korean MMO developed and published by NCSoft. It released in North America back in 2016 and is actually one of the more recent titles available. Blade & Soul is easily one of the best looking free MMOs. There are maybe 2 other games that have graphics comparable to this. It utilizes an action combat system with a large focus on not only crowd control, but also on ability chaining. Crowd control in this game is actually something that I highly detest in PvP. Seriously, it's actually the reason that I stopped participating in it. This game features a large world, again with segregated zones. It also features a strong focus on faction-based PvP, but the only way to engage in this is by equipping uniforms of the opposite faction. There is, however, instanced PvP for players that want to go that route. Dragon Nest is a Korean MMO developed and published by Identity Games. It released in North America back in 2011 and went on to be considered the greatest PvP MMO of its generation. Dragon Nest definitely looks dated graphically. As an anime MMO, they tend not to excel graphically, but Dragon Nest definitely shows its age both in model design and the world itself. Still, it holds up well considering. It utilizes a fast action combat system with honestly far too many abilities for me to realistically wrap my head around, and while the PvP is far from what it once was in terms of activity, I've been told that it's still some of the best out there. The game makes use of a hybrid world. It's mostly instanced, as the game is predominantly focused on running dungeons, with town hubs being areas to gather with other players, but there are segregated zones disconnected from the hubs and dungeons for players to explore as well. Dungeon Fighter Online is a Korean MMO developed and published by Nepal. It released in North America back in 2010. This game, counting China, has millions of active players playing daily and is generally considered to be the most populated MMO in the entire world. It's a gorgeous game. It looks very different to what we're used to, and it actually features a unique graphical style that has players move horizontally. There is very limited vertical movement present. It utilizes some of the fastest, flashiest, most satisfying combat in the whole MMO genre, with more classes and subclasses than almost any game that I've played, with the exception of Ragnarok and MapleStory. This is a hub MMO, and as such, the vast majority of the game takes place in dungeons that you can tackle with other players. There are town hubs that you can visit and interact with other players as well. EVERQUEST is an American MMO developed by Variant Interactive and 989 Studios and published by Sony Online Entertainment. It released in North America back in 1999. Yes, this game is actually over 2 decades old, and honestly it shows. There's no denying that EVERQUEST looks ridiculously old, but Just because it fails to compete visually with its competition does not inherently make it inferior. On the contrary, EVERQUEST is an incredibly unique, old-school MMO that even 23 years later has a loyal player base of active players. It utilizes a slow point-and-click combat system requiring players cycle through enemies with their mouse. It makes use of a large open world with a plethora of things to explore and a lot of danger to accompany it. FLYFF is a Korean MMO developed by Gala Lab Corp and published by Way to Bid. It released in North America back in 2011. FLYFF continues to be one of the most traditional anime MMOs currently available. It maintains its mid-2000s graphical design and admittedly looks a little dated, but it has the benefit of being an anime title and those tend to age pretty well. It utilizes a basic tab target combat system with no real customization, and it makes use of a large segregated world with a plethora of different seasonal environments. Guild Wars 2 is a Western MMO developed by ArenaNet and published by NCSoft. It released in North America back in 2012 and has gone on to receive 3 major expansions in the last decade. This is a gorgeous game, by far one of, if not the best looking Western MMO ever created. The zones look incredible, the character models, the outfits, everything about this title screams quality. It utilizes a unique hybrid combat system, combining both tab target and action combat together into an interesting amalgamation you don't typically see within the genre. It has a massive world, albeit it is segregated, not that you really notice given the sheer size of it. Lost Ark is a Korean MMO developed by Smilegate and published by Amazon Game Studios. It released in North America in 2022. Yeah, this is the only MMO to have released this year. This game looks great, and interestingly enough, is one of the only top-down isometric MMOs available online. It utilizes an incredibly fast, impactful, and fulfilling action combat system that makes use of keys on your keyboard you typically tend to ignore, having players move their character with their mouse as opposed to traditional WASD keys. It has a large segregated world, but provides an enormous ocean with which to sail and explore. Mabinogi is a Korean MMO developed by DevCat and published by Nexon. It released in North America back in 2008 and has since gone on to remain the only MMO of its kind. While this game was developed and released in Korea almost 2 decades ago, and it definitely shows its age, it employs a unique cel-shaded graphical style that no other MMO uses, not a single one. It utilizes an interesting rock, paper, scissors inspired tab target combat style, although the combat itself does feel very slow. I never really hit a point in the game where it felt like I was required to engage with much of what was going on. The world, though it is massive, albeit segregated, there's just so much to explore that at times it can be a little bit overwhelming. Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis is a Japanese MMO developed and published by Sega. It released worldwide in 2021. This is by far the best looking anime MMO available. There is no game that competes with the stunning environments, the depth with which you can customize your character, nor the effects in combat. Combat is pure action. It's fast, it's fluid, and it's fun. The world is large, although, like most MMOs, it is segregated. The game is still limited in terms of content, but it's come a long way in the last several months. Rift is a Western MMO developed and published by Tryon Worlds. It released worldwide in 2011. While the game is over a decade old, it still holds up very well graphically. The zones all look incredibly high quality. Granted, the character models leave a lot to be desired, as is the case with literally every Western MMO. Combat is a slow, traditional type of tab target combat, but it utilizes a unique soul system that allows for you to create a variety of builds to fit the situation. The world is large, albeit segregated. There are rifts that open up, spawning zone-wide events. This was one of the first times a feature like this was actually implemented in an MMO. RuneScape and Old School RuneScape are 2 separate versions of the same game with completely different communities going back over 2 decades, and I'd be lying if I said that the game looked great. But not every game needs to look great to actually be great, right? It utilizes a much older, more traditional type of click to select combat. Players click the enemy they want to fight, and well, you can cycle through other enemies doing the same thing. Its world is also very large in both games, too large even. SOULWORKER is a Korean MMO developed and published by Lion Game Studios. It released in North America back in 2018. Along with PSO2 New Genesis, SOULWORKER happens to be one of the most stunning anime MMOs available. These two games are carrying the anime subgenre right now. Combat is also incredibly fast, it's very fluid, it's very flashy, and is very impactful. The game world is hub-based though, which I know turns a lot of people away from it. As it is a hub MMO, it has a focus on small town hubs where you can gather and chat with other players, with the bulk of the game taking place within dungeons. Star Wars: The Old Republic is a Western MMO developed by BioWare and published by Electronic Arts. It released worldwide in 2011. As you'd expect from a game with the Star Wars title in its name, The Old Republic stays true to the franchise. The game looks decent, nothing extraordinary like Lost Ark or PSO2 New Genesis, but given this is a Western MMO, I'd give them props here for developing something that looks as good as it does. It has an incredibly strong narrative, yet suffers from some very slow, somewhat limiting tab target combat. There's an enormous world, or selection of worlds to explore, providing more unique environments than you've probably ever experienced in an MMO. Swords of Legends Online is a Chinese MMO developed by Wangyuan Shentang Entertainment and published by Gameforge. It released worldwide in 2021. Yeah, like PSO2 New Genesis and Lost Ark, this game isn't even a year old yet. Solo is a gorgeous game though. You cannot look at this and think anything other than that this is stunning to look at. It features just as good combat. It's a hybrid blend of both tab target and action. Since the game has a large focus on Shansha, there's a lot of magical martial arts themes going on within the game, offering a different type of fantasy than we're typically used to. While the world is segregated, there are plenty of large environments to ride around or fly around exploring. My only issue with the game is its horrendous, toxic community. TERA is a Korean MMO developed by Bluehole Studio and published by Gameforge. It released in North America back in 2012. TERA has definitely begun to show its age in recent years, but it tends to continue to be one of the better looking free MMOs out there. It utilizes what is arguably the best action combat in the entire genre, both free and premium MMOs. And I know some people might debate this, and this is kind of a contentious opinion to have when Black Desert fans are out there, but I haven't really found a more satisfying combat than in TERA's. The world is also pretty damn large. It's kinda segregated as well, but not entirely. TORAM Online is a Japanese cross-platform MMO developed and published by Asabimo, and yeah, I did say cross-platform, because it is playable across both PC and mobile devices. TORAM also happens to be the only cross-platform compatible MMO in this list. Graphically, the game doesn't look bad. It doesn't look and feel as good as one would expect of a PC exclusive title, but it definitely doesn't look and feel like a mobile one either. It utilizes a traditional type of tab target combat that looks and feels pretty basic. Its world is also pretty large, it's segregated, and travel is exceptionally slow, but there is a lot to explore. VINDICTUS is a Korean MMO developed by DevCat and published by Nexon. It released in North America in 2010. I like to say that this game has begun to show its age, but it really hasn't. It's horrendously optimized, sure, but the character models still continue to look incredible. The environments, especially as you continue to progress through the game, look fantastic. It utilizes a full action combat system and even allows for you to directly interact with not only enemies, picking them up and using them as weapons, but also the environment itself, such as pillars, such as rocks or sticks. The game is a hub MMO, however, and as such, there are only a handful of hubs that players hang around in while waiting to enter dungeons. And that is it. Woo! I don't even want to count how many games that was. 15, 18, but realistically these are the best that the entire free genre has to offer. Some might argue that I missed one or two, but I don't know, I feel like I covered all of the important ones. Now, if you're looking for a list of every MMO that is slated to release over the course of 2022 this year, then I got you covered. Go ahead and click this video over here where I go over every game coming out in 2022.